Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We enter the 81st chapter of the 10th Skandha of Bhagavatam. This is the concluding portion of the wonderful story of Sudama, the dear friend of Krishna. So we saw in the last chapter how this poor friend Sudama, who had gone to school, that is to Gurukul with Krishna, when they were both in the Gurukul of Sandipani, and after that he came and he was living with his wife and family, and yet he was extremely poor with not even good clothes to wear. And then, being prodded by his wife, he comes to see Krishna, and Krishna, of course, welcomes him, accords him the highest respect, gives him all the articles of worship, honors him, and then reminisces about their times together. Now, we continue. Shuka Brahmarishi says, Krishna knows the mind of all beings, and he is especially devoted to those who are true Brahmanas, that is, true sagely beings, those who are truly surrendered, those who are truly inquiring into the essence of truth, essence of God. Such beings, known as true Brahmanas, they are always in the heart of Krishna. He always takes care of them, and this Sudama is one such being, and therefore Krishna was very happy to have him, and he spoke to him with great love and in sweet words. So after reminiscing about the days together and all that, now Krishna asks him with great love, "Oh friend, what have you brought for me?" So this is a very beautiful way Krishna is asking. He knows this friend is extremely poor, and yet he knows that he will not come empty-handed. And so Krishna asks him, "Oh friend, what have you brought for me? Whatever little thing you've brought, that I will accept with great love, because I know that you bring it with true love. The one who brings the smallest thing to me with true love, I greatly relish it. But the one who brings me very opulent things only to make a show, I do not care for it." So he says here, Kim upayamanitam Brahman me bhavata grihat. What did you bring from your house, O learned Brahman? Anu api upahritam bhaktai premna bhuryeva me bhavet. He says, even a small thing, something as small as an atom that is brought with love, is something that I accept with great joy. And then Krishna repeats a verse he says in the Bhagavad Gita too. It's a very famous verse. The verse is Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati Tadaham Bhakti Upahritam Ashnami Prayatatmanah. So Krishna says in the Gita too, in the 9th chapter, and the same verse here, that the one who offers to me with love, even a flower, even a leaf, a fruit, or just water, that I accept wholeheartedly with great joy. Because such a being, when he offers it with a pure intellect, with a pure mind, with a clear heart, that gives me great joy. So saying this, Krishna asks Sudama, "What did you bring?" But Sudama was still very shy, because he knows that all he could bring was what his wife begged. As we can recall, his wife went and begged a few neighbors, got beaten flat rice, and put it in a rag, in a torn piece of cloth, tied it together and sent it. So he was, of course, too ashamed to even think about it. He is sitting in the most opulent palace. Queen Rukmini is standing next to Krishna and waving a very beautiful, ornate feather fan. And even the maid servants are dressed so beautifully there. And so he is so ashamed to even think of the beaten rice he has got. So he hangs his head in shame. But Krishna, of course, reads the mind of all beings, and therefore he knows exactly what he has brought and what is in his mind. So Krishna thinks to himself, this Brahmana is a great friend, and what's most beautiful is he has never sought anything for himself so far, and even now he has come here only because his wife asked him to come, and he simply came because of that, not to ask for any money, and his main motive is to simply see me. Therefore, such a pure being is so rare, so I shall give him so much wealth that even the demigods will not be able to dream of such wealth. Thinking in this way, it is that Krishna reaches out of his own, though this Brahmana Sudama is so ashamed. Krishna doesn't mind. He reaches out, grabs the torn piece of cloth, that rag with the beaten rice in it, and then he says, what is this? What have you got? You're not telling me about it. He says, so here it says, Sarva Bhutatma Drik Sakshat Tasya Agamana Karanam. Krishna knows exactly why he has come, and therefore he says, what have you got here now? It looks like you've got something extremely delicious. Give it to me. So, saying in this way, he grabs this bag of beaten rice, the bag made of torn cloth. He takes it out, and then he says, this is enough for me. This will satisfy not just me but the whole world. Saying this, he opens it, takes a handful of the beaten rice and puts it in his mouth, and he eats it with great relish. And then he reaches out for a second handful, and Rukmini stops him. Very beautifully, it says Rukmini, who is a manifestation of the mother of wealth herself, that is manifestation of Lakshmi. She catches hold of the Lord's hand because she feels that the one handful that Krishna has taken in his mouth is already enough to give all the wealth that is necessary for Sudama and his family. If he takes one more, it will be too much for him to handle. And therefore, Rukmini stops him and says, oh Lord, she says, it is enough. He says, Etavat alam Vishwatman Sarva Sampati Samruddhaye. So she says, this is enough. This one handful of rice you have taken will give abundance of wealth for all time to come. So the Brahmana doesn't understand all this. So this is a dialogue going on between Rukmini and Krishna, and Sudama doesn't know that they are talking about his house. All that Sudama knows is Krishna is taking with so much love this utterly beaten rice and eating it with great relish. And then after that they retire for the night. He is again fed a great meal, Sudama, and then he spends the night there resting in the palace, and he feels like he's literally in paradise. It says Bhuktva Pitva Sukham Mene Atmanam Swargatam Yata. So he had great food, he had great whatever beverages they could give him, he had all of that, and then he was so happy. Most importantly, he consumed with all his senses the presence of Krishna. So he was resting there like he was in heaven, more than heaven. In fact, it's like he was resting in the eternal abode of the Supreme Being. And then the next morning, he takes leave of Krishna and he leaves for his home. And when he does so, Krishna, who is the source of the entire universe, he comes on his out of the palace and talks to him and walks along with him. So it is a very customary tradition, even now followed in many cases in Bharat especially, where when a guest leaves the house, the host does not simply say bye at the door, but they come outside, walk them to the car or walk them to wherever they have to go till they actually leave the place. So, but Krishna does this very thing even to Sudama. So he comes out of the palace speaking in sweet words, bowing down to him, walking some distance, and sending off Sudama Krishna gives him thus the highest respect. So Sudama now leaves. Now he has left Dwaraka, and then he realizes that he didn't ask anything of Krishna. So one of the reasons his wife sent him was, of course, to ask for some financial help. His motive was to simply see Krishna, and of course, by seeing Krishna, his motive was satisfied, and he completely forgot that his wife asked him to ask for money or help, and he was quite happy that he didn't ask. So he said, I didn't ask anything, and in fact, he even felt ashamed that he even entertained the thought of asking because of his wife, but he was supremely happy that he didn't ask, and he was completely flooded with the blessed sight of Krishna. So he said to himself, what a wonder! I have seen today with my own eyes Krishna, and how much love he has for me, how much love he has for all those who are true Brahmanas. He truly takes care of those who are surrendered, who are devoted, who are into realization of God. Krishna's love for such beings is incomparable. He clasped me, he held me tight, he honored me, and what a destitute I am. So he says, Aho Brahmanya Devasya Drishtva Brahmanyatamaya Yad Daridratamo Lakshmim Ashlishto Bibrato Rasi. So he says Daridra means one who's very destitute. So he says, I am such a destitute, I have nothing. My clothes are even so bad, and yet, simply because I am his friend, and also because he considers me a Brahmana, he is giving me such respect. And then he says further, Kwaham Daridraha Papiyan Kwa Krishna Sriniketanah Brahmabandhuriti Smaham Bahubhyam Parirambhitaha. He says, where am I, this destitute, poor Brahman, and where is Krishna, who is Sriniketan? Sriniketan means the abode of wealth itself. And yet, because he considers me a Brahmana, someone who is dedicated to study and surrender to God, he holds me in his arms, he hugs me, he treated me like his own brother, he made me sit on the bed, and his beloved consort Rukmini fanned me. He is, after all, the God of all gods, and he was sitting there and he was offering me all this great worship. What a great wonder. He says, Pujito Deva Devena Vipradevena Devavat. So he says, like I was treated literally like a demigod and given all this respect. And then he goes on to say, therefore, to himself. So this is all Sudama reminiscing to himself about his most wonderful stay as he is walking back to his home. So he says to himself, all the bliss of the world and ultimate liberation and all supernatural powers, everything comes from his very feet. He says, Swarga apavarga yoho pumsam rasayam bhuvi sampadam sarvasam api siddhinam moolam tat charanarchanam. By simply adoring the lotus feet of Krishna, one gets everything. One can get heavenly pleasures, one can get liberation, one can get supernatural yogic powers, all kinds of things. And yet Krishna did not give me any wealth, and I am very thankful for it, because he realizes that, or he rather thinks so far, that Krishna did not give him anything. He just went with his bag of beaten rice, gave it. He didn't get anything back. He, of course, was given a great meal. He was served so beautifully, and then he came empty handed. So, and he was very happy with it. So, this is the attitude of Sudama and why he is so pure hearted. He did not think for a moment, I didn't get anything. In fact, he was quite happy and thankful. He said, while Krishna served me so beautifully with such respect, and Rukmini herself served me with such respect, there is a reason why he didn't give me any wealth, because he perhaps thought that getting wealth will make me proud and make me forget him, and therefore, out of his mercy, he didn't give me anything. So, thinking in all these ways, he comes to his house. When he reaches his house, or where his house used to be, suddenly he sees that there are huge 7-storied buildings there. And there are multiple buildings. They are shiny, they are like sun and fire, shiny and golden. and in between them there are gardens and parks. There are beautiful birds, and then ponds are there, flowers and bees are around, and there are many men and women who are well dressed, buzzing around. So he is seeing this place and he says, have I come to the wrong place? He checks around and he realizes that the neighborhood is the same. He has come to the right address. Then he says, whose place it is? What happened? Did they get rid of my place and some rich man took over when I was gone? What happened to my wife then? What has happened here? What has transformed? So he was thinking in all these ways, wondering what has happened. When that's happening, suddenly, a bunch of men and women who are all dressed so splendorously come to receive this poor Brahmana, and they are playing musical instruments. So, hearing all this sound, his wife comes out, and the wife comes out of one of these palatial buildings, and she is looking herself so opulent. She is dressed so opulently like Mother Lakshmi herself, and her eyes are wet looking at her husband, and she bows down to him and she embraces him in her heart. So now this Brahmana is astonished for a moment. He's slowly gathering what has happened. He has come to his house, in fact. He's been entirely transformed. His wife is looking so opulent, and she is surrounded by so many maid servants who are all serving her. Everybody is dressed so beautifully. The place is looking so rich, and he sees that everyone is wearing necklaces of gold. Then he enters the house and sees that the house is full of pillars with gems, and the beds are all made of ivory, and the bed sheets are all looking white and soft like milk foam. There is strings of pearls from all the canopies there. There are crystals of emeralds and various precious stones hanging around. Seeing all this, he starts reflecting and then he recognizes, see, I've been poor and unlucky from birth. There is no way this fortune can come to me of my own accord. But look, I have been in the gracious presence of Krishna, the crown jewel of the whole universe, and this is the cause of this. He has simply bestowed such grace by simply taking this beaten rice that I gave him, and now he is putting one on one together what Rukmini was telling him, telling Krishna rather at the time, that any more than this will be too much to handle. So now he realizes what Rukmini was telling, because having that one handful of beaten rice has instantly transformed his house into this opulent rows of palaces, and so many opulences around. So he tells himself Krishna, who has infinite objects of enjoyment at his disposal, knowing fully well what is necessary, he gives in abundance. And for him, any gift is insignificant, and yet he gives so abundantly. So he says he's like a cloud of rain. When a farmer needs it, the rain just pours in the night silently, and he gets up in the morning and he sees that the entire field is being nourished. Similarly, without me knowing, without telling me anything, he has silently given all these opulences, and he has made such a big deal out of a small present I gave him, and he doesn't even talk about the huge abundant gifts he provides us. In fact, if we look at the whole universe, every abundance is coming from the Supreme Being, starting from the opulence of nature, the beauty of sunrise, all the fruits and vegetables we are able to eat, all the grains, all the clothing that's available. Every single thing is the opulence, the abundance of the Supreme Being, through which the nature is providing so much for us. And here, in the case of Sudama, he directly got an evidence of this by getting this personal fortune as well. And therefore, looking at all this, Sudama is filled with gratitude and love, and he tells himself that may I have only love, goodwill, friendship, and service to him, and devotion to him all the time, nothing else. See, this is the purity of Sudama, that seeing all this wealth, he is not swayed even the least bit. and he is only filled with humility, love, and devotion more by seeing this. It says, Tasyeva me sauhruda sakya maitri dasyam punar janmani janmani syat. He says, forever and ever and ever, may I be filled only with goodwill, friendship, love, and attitude of service. That's all that I pray for. Krishna, who is ever free, who is always aware of the evil that attachment can cause, does not give wealth unless one can handle it. And therefore, since he has given this wealth, I have to make sure that I never get attached to it. He normally refuses any prayer for wealth and power and fame because he knows that his devotees cannot handle it if they are not mature enough. But he has bestowed this on me, which means now I have to live up to it, which is to say, never get attached to it and be always only in contemplation of Krishna. In this way, by his reason, this Brahmana Sudama concludes that even though he is now filled with worldly pleasures, he will live very sparingly without any attachment, and thereby he and his wife lived only with ever increasing devotion to Krishna. So this is the beauty of the story. So Shuka Brahmarishi concludes it by saying, the Almighty God of all demigods, the Lord of all sacrifices, Krishna, he looks upon anyone who is pure surrendered devotee as his own deity. And therefore there is nobody greater than one who is surrendered to the Lord. That is why Krishna is also called as Bhakta Vatsala. The one who is not conquered by anything is conquered only by the love of his devotees, pure devotees. And because Sudama is one such pure devotee, this Brahmana, he was able to conquer the Lord by his pure love. And recognizing this, he was also always absorbed only in contemplation of the Lord and not ever getting attached to all these opulences around him. And in this way, Sudama spent the rest of his life, and thereby he got liberated and attained the eternal abode. So this way, the story is concluded by Shuka Brahmarishi, and he concludes it by saying that the one who listens to this account of the friendship of Krishna and Sudama, and how through that friendship and the purity of Sudama, how he attained the eternal abode of unconditional love, by listening to this, one can always develop devotion in the heart and be free of attachment. He says, Etad Brahmanya Devasya Shrutva Brahmanyatam Naraha Labda Bhavo Bhagavati Karma Bandhat Vimuchyate. So that is the phala, that is the fruit of listening to this story, is that even though outwardly the story is about how a poor man became rich, and that is how it can be normally seen, but the beauty of Bhagavatam, Shuka Brahmarishi says, that's not the main moral of the story, that someone was poor and then he went to Krishna and Krishna blessed him with all the wealth and he became rich. That's only the outer story. The true inner story, which is the most important, is the purity of Sudama, that he did not change the least bit even while he was poor and while he became rich. If anything, he became even more humble and more absorbed in love of Krishna after he became so rich, and thereby he got liberated. And therefore, by understanding this and therefore not being attached to the ups and downs of one's financial material situation, but ever recognizing the only truth of the Supreme Being in our heart, we can also realize the truth of Bhagavan here and now. So that's the fruit of listening to this story. And with this chapter ends. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.